From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode. This is your host, Eric, and today we're talking about technology, law enforcement, and how do we build some more efficiencies? How do we get help and resources from partners, from vendor services? Because we are understaffed, we do have a lot of work, and that's sworn side, that's support side. But today I have Ben Walker joining us from Ditto Transcripts. So Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Can you tell us a little bit about Ditto and kind of the origin story here and what all the services you provide? Because I know that you're not just for law enforcement services, you're across many industries.
Yeah, the long story short is we started as a medical transcription company almost 20 years ago now. And as things changed in the healthcare industry, doctors now point and click. They don't dictate like they used to. At the same time, we were getting calls from local law enforcement agencies here in Denver asking us to help them transcribe audio, and we would turn them away because we didn't have experience with it. And as we started losing medical clients, I started looking into the law enforcement world, and it kind of dovetails with the legal industry also, because so much of what you all do ends up in the courtroom at some point.
Yeah.
And we found out that the legal and law enforcement transcription industries were massive, and they were starting to need our help more and more because they were losing back office staff support that was doing the transcription for the detectives and officers before. And as you know, a lot of the support staff has shrunk, and that's where we come in to help fill that void when they're behind or they simply don't have time to do it themselves. And we expanded our services to legal, law enforcement, academic. We work with some insurance companies, some financial, wealth management type companies, transcribing everything from interviews, focus groups, wiretaps, jail calls. If we can hear it, we'll transcribe it.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see so much benefit in that. I mean, I have some buddies that work in homicide, in these major crimes cases, and the personnel power to listen to these calls is arduous. And we recognize a lot of times, whether it's listening to a call or like watching surveillance video, you could just read and glean information, and you could even have and we'll talk about AI, right? We could have AI look for certain aspects potentially in the transcripts in free text that could be a lot more efficient. I mean, I certainly personally could scan through pages and lines of information and look for things that would stand out that would take a long time listening to.
Yes, and you kind of hinted on the human brain can read 3 times faster than it can watch a video at normal speed. So
Yeah.
without speeding up the audio, you can read 3 times faster. And the people that use us, they either know that or they subconsciously know that.
Sure.
So that's why they use us, because they don't want to sit around and watch a surveillance video or listen to an interview that is 3 hours long when they could read it in less than an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of these interviews, like you need it for prosecution, right? You need it for the case. You need it to file, and so it is going to take personal power. And I, in my experience in hiring, it's not just been cops that have been hard to hire in the last several years. It's the public sector, right? And like jobs are the job market's different. People they can work remote, and so shout out to agencies if you have support staff that can hybridize or something like that. That might be a good selling point. But yeah, it's a tough job market in general. And so do you find that that's why a lot of agencies are going to you? I mean, you talked about the speed, but also just like the labor hours involved.
Oh, 100%. Because if you were to compare, and no offense to you, but if you were to transcribe the same audio, like let's say it's a 2-hour interview with a
Hmm.
suspect, it's probably going to take you 10 to 12 hours to do that, where that's going to take someone that works for us 6 hours. So you're cutting the time in half. And I'm being generous saying it'll take you 12 hours because you more than likely don't have a foot pedal and you don't have macros built in or text expanders.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, it would take me a long time because I'm not a classically trained typist, and I get a lot of typos just because some of my coworkers make fun of me because I type loudly. It doesn't mean I type quickly. But yeah, what does make people so quick? And that is like kind of the nod to AI, because when I learned about Ditto, when I started looking at your website and we were talking about coming on, I was like, wait, I don't think they use AI, but that is most of the services that you hear, and that's most of the attention in a lot of different law enforcement type of technology now or services is like using AI because of a potential speed advantage.
Oh, yes. So going back to the 2-hour interview, AI would probably have that churned out in maybe 3 hours, depending on the complexity of the audio. If it's a one-on-one like you and I right now, it might go a little bit faster. And it also depends which model you're using, and if you're using the public one or if you're using a private one that doesn't go to the public servers to train. But let's say it's 3 hours, and, like I said, it would take us 6, and we obviously cost more than AI. We guarantee 99% accuracy, where AI is, it depends who you ask, but they
Hmm.
might be in the 80% area. We've done a lot of testing, and some of it comes back much lower than that. If there are 4 or 5 people and there's background noise, or someone isn't speaking loud enough, or the microphone is too far away. There's
Mm-hmm.
all those factors where that doesn't really affect us because we're humans and we understand the context and we can hear the whispers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, where AI struggles with that still, and it's not as good as it probably will become. But yeah, that's kind of why we still exist, because it's not there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you illustrate a little bit more? Like, tell me about the text expanders or foot pedals. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean?
So all our people use foot pedals that have 3 pedals, and the one in the middle, and then there's 2 smaller ones on the outside. The one in the middle is like pressing the gas on your car, and it goes, so it plays the audio. And once
Mm.
you lift your foot off that, it stops. And then the one on the right and the one on the left can be programmed to go fast forward or rewind, and then you can program it to either jump ahead a half a second or a second and a half, or jump backwards, a quarter of a second or 3 seconds.
Mm.
It's whatever your preference is.
Yeah.
So, they never take their hands off the keyboard. They don't use the mouse at all.
Yeah, it makes so
That
much sense.
I mean, they're so fast they can touch or contact 7 keys per second. That's how fast they go. And the text expanders would be for commonly used names or places that might be longer, like Snohomish.
Hmm.
For me, that's kind of hard to spell. For you, it's probably easy.
Yeah,
But
I've seen it a lot. Yeah.
yeah, our transcriptionist will put that in as SNOH, and it will then automatically fill out the rest of it,
Uh,
Snohomish.
yeah.
Or let's say Jefferson County Sheriff's Office will be Jeffco SO, and it will
Mm.
fill it all out.
Yeah. No, that makes sense because I am imagining, shoot, when I when I started, and this is some active cops are gonna think that I'm a dinosaur because when I started, we had like mini tape cassette recorders to record our, victim witness statements. We'd actually, instead of using an envelope, which I don't really understand why, we would write it on a piece of paper, like fill out the blanks of who it was. We'd roll it up and staple it, and then we'd hand it off and turn it in. And someone, as one of their ancillary duties, like a records specialists would do that in time, and they had to prioritize it. But I'm imagining you're having to play that thing, stop it, and even then, like, yeah, it's a tape recorder and that's clunky. But even as you've described, I'm imagining if it was a file on my computer, I have to manipulate a mouse. I might have to go into a different window to do that smoothly, even if I had a keystroke to do it on, that's it's toggling something else that you don't have to toggle, which makes so much sense when you explain it that way.
Yeah, and that's why they're able to hit 7 characters per second
Mm,
because they don't take their hands off the keyboard. And they usually use, um, mechanical keyboards, which are gaming keyboards. I
yeah.
don't have one. We have a bunch of them floating around the office, but they're easier on your hands, and they're also easier to press down than
Mm,
the keyboard you probably have that
yeah.
came with your laptop or your desktop.
Hmm.
It's more comfortable to use, and it's faster and easier to use.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. You did a couple local shout outs, Snohomish and Jefferson County, and there are a lot of listeners in Washington State and West Coast, but then also throughout the nation. And so, are there things that stand out? You mentioned a couple examples, but things that stand out as far as like law enforcement usage of what some of the biggest takeaways for people that have come on and started using your service. You're like, oh my gosh, this has alleviated this, or this is a huge benefit that we like using it for.
Yeah, there's, a pretty entertaining one from the state of Arkansas that I feel like I can tell now because they are not a client anymore. It
Mm,
was a 7-year contract, and when it went back out for RFP, someone underbid us and was able to get the award. But
mm,
originally, when we were working with them, one of the commanders, who's now retired, so that's also why I think I can tell this story. He won't mind because he's retired. Um, he loved having the transcription service so his guys would be out in the field because they would be in the office talking about football, baseball, and not doing their work. And he wanted them out in the field conducting interviews, doing their investigations.
mhm.
And if they had to do their own transcription, that meant they had to be at their desk, at their computer, and they were in one big room, the investigators for major crimes in his unit. And that's when things would sometimes go sideways and conversations would end up taking an hour, hour and a half because, Arkansas was playing LSU that week or somebody. And he really liked that he could send us all their audio and his guys could be out in the field and not in the office behind their desk.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I'm recalling you mentioned a little bit of the accuracy, right? 99% accuracy. That's huge. And before the conversation, we were talking about, locally, and I've talked about this before, but it's no secret that in my county, King County, the prosecuting attorney's office has said that they want no AI involvement with the generation of case reports. And we've talked about AI for generating case reports. It is a fantastic tool that is evolving, and the right application and the right safeguards, sure. But I kind of wanted to go back to that conversation and see what your thoughts are as far as like offering this other option, right? So you have human transcriptionists working through these different dynamics and what that can afford.
Without being too negative toward AI and what it has done, it's the misunderstanding that is holding it back. And also when there are sections of the audio where there's nothing being said, they'll insert things that they just hallucinate. That's where it's really an issue. Because, like I said, we've tested it a bunch and we can't get it to not fill in blank spots or get homonyms right. So think about there, and there, here and here, where and where. It oftentimes misses those, and editing it takes longer than if we were to just type it ourselves from the get go.
Sure.
Because that goes back to using the mouse when you edit, and the transcriptionists are very used to keeping their hands on the keyboard and not using the mouse. But once they have to take their hand off the keyboard and go to the mouse, remember the 7 characters per second? They can't do that anymore if their
Hmm.
hand is on the mouse and they're moving it around on the page to go change things here and there.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you not bashing AI. And in our conversation before recording was very much that. That's why I love this venue to have the conversation. We're like, hey, like this is what you offer, and there may be evolving AI technologies that are very appropriate and very useful in different capacities. As we use in law enforcement. An anecdote is like I was preparing for trial and I was watching my body cam about a year or two ago, and the body cam, the incident was from a year or two prior to when I was reviewing it. But at the time, there hadn't been an AI component to the transcription of like the dialogue and me walking around the scene and talking to witnesses. Um, so I was watching it and I was also noticing and kind of in awe. I'm like, oh wow, this additional feature. And I was reading it and I was like, oh, that's pretty close. Okay, that's a little different. Okay, I can see that. But it was a little distracting, but it was also interesting. But then there was this time where there was a conversation happening down the hallway between two involved parties or witnesses. And I couldn't hear it. I don't remember hearing it. I was talking to one person right in front of me, but on the video now and the audio, I could hear mumbling. But then it was putting in a dialogue that I was recognizing that could be what they're saying. I was like, but I have no idea, and I cannot regard this. And I think that is just a helpful reminder to those listening that hey, whatever the technology is, whatever the feature, we need to be really cognizant so that we can be really responsible. And that is where you have reasons like, a prosecuting attorney's office saying, hey, until, for now, pump the brakes. We're not doing that because we don't want officers to accidentally perjure themselves or what have you in a case report, court document kind of thing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And what I think it is very useful for right now is a good rough draft. So you can quickly scan through and know where the important parts of the conversation are. And if it's not going to be transcribed because there's a plea agreement, then you're going to save money that way. And you'll also be able to give the DA, hey, go to this timestamp, listen to this part of the conversation. This is where the good stuff is,
Mm,
the important stuff. And it's extremely helpful in those situations. When it does go to prosecution, that's when you need the perfect transcript that's signed off on. And that's what we do for the clients we work with is we sign off, we certify, and our transcriptionists literally sign it, and they can be called to testify. Whereas Axon or whoever else is doing the AI, they don't sign off on anything. They're not taking any liability. It's all on the investigator, detective, or officer. Their reputation and job is on the line because they're the ones that sign off on those versions.
mhm.
And without extensive editing, I would be uh, very hesitant myself to sign off on it and say, yes, this is perfect,
Yeah.
especially for the long, drawn out cases that might have 20, 30, 40 interviews. You're talking hours and hours and hours of interviews. That's going to take a lot of manpower and time to go through it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of good points you made, which is not like not abandoning or saying, hey, there's no room for this technology. Yeah, there's responsible ways to use it, right? So maybe it's a draft, maybe it's for the review purposes, maybe it's for internal discussion, but not the officialized document yet, right? And not in this context where you have to have it all buttoned up and sent off certified, to your point. Um, I think for a lot of listeners, if they're case detectives or their administrator like that's thinking, okay, this does sound like a really viable resource to free up a lot of bandwidth and get that speed. You gave an anecdote, a local anecdote, and we won't say what agency, where you did a little bit of it sounded almost like a casual presentation where you're just outlining like what is done and the speed and efficiency, where the bosses in the room were kind of like, oh my gosh, we go slow. Which is the point, right? Like you are so special, like your people are so specialized in this thing. You've refined this process. Um, for those that are like, yeah, like, but at what cost? I like that you outline even on your website, like, hey, some people kind of piecemeal at this and that. Um, they integrate your services with their full-time staff or part-time staff. Can you expand a little bit on that and some of the options there?
Yeah. So without saying any of their names, because I don't have permission to use their names, in your part of the world, up in Washington State, we complement in-house record staff with a couple sheriff's offices, and they send us the important audio that needs to be transcribed that's over 20 minutes long.
Mm.
So their in-house staff does 19 minutes and under. And then we do the 20 minutes and longer because a 20-minute file will more than likely take between 60 and 80 minutes. So it's 3 or 4 to 1 ratio for a really good transcriptionist. And don't get me wrong, their in-house people are very good. They're down to 2 now, and they used to have 4. So that's where we come in, and that's why they send us the longer stuff because they need to get the smaller files, shorter files done quickly, and they can do that in a normal workday. And then there are other agencies that will send us every interview they have because they don't have a back office support staff anymore.
Mhm.
Like they may have a records person, but the records person is one person, and they might have 25-ish investigators, so they can't keep up with 25 people. If they are doing any in-house in that situation, it's the major crimes, and then again, they're doing the shorter files, and we're doing the longer files because the longer files take so much longer. Like, it think about it, that 2-hour interview we talked about earlier, that's gonna take 6 to 8 hours. That could be one person's entire day, where
Yeah.
we have those people. We have them dedicated. They're specialized law enforcement transcriptionists that work law enforcement every single day. And we also have our people specialize for particular clients. Like the Washington State Patrol client that we work with is done by the same 2 or 3 transcriptionists every time. So they know everyone's names, they can recognize voices,
Mm.
they know all the landmarks around the area or state. They don't misspell things because they're specialized for
Yeah.
our client, that particular client. And then, we have clients in the Southeast that those transcriptionists don't transcribe for because they're not trained to. We have other transcriptionists that do that because we want them to go faster and to be accurate. It gets done quicker for the law enforcement agency. It gets done right every time by having them highly specialized and not crisscrossing between agencies or even uh, our other niche industries we work with. Like the law enforcement transcriptionists don't do academic transcription. Like
Mm.
they're not specialized in that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. There's so much technical language in vernacular in law enforcement that's different than medical, and then like may overlap and a lot of times doesn't with like just strict legal stuff. And then there's slang. There's cop slang. There's subject slang that in the communities that range all across the nation. So that is really interesting, and it makes tons of sense to hear, right? Like, so you have people that specialize in just like anyone that's been working somewhere for a little while, like once you work with your squad, like you don't need them to say the call sign, their voice. And so that is kind of fun to hear that people get accustomed to the people that they're hearing from, and that does promote accuracy, like how someone says a word or how they say like a slang kind of phrase.
Yeah, and when we originally started working with the Arkansas State Police, they asked us to make sure we had people in the Southeast and in the South because they speak differently than people here in Denver and
Hmm.
people in Washington State. Like, so we had to make sure we had people that understood their slang
Yeah.
and their
Accents,
drawl.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of going with the speed, and we've nodded to this, but you highlight how this is not just a nice to have, but a need to have, and you talk about statutory requirements. That is that a reason that some agencies have gone to you because the sheer need of like, man, like they're gonna boggle these cases and be in a lot of trouble if they're not actually finishing them in a timely fashion.
Yes. 100%. A lot of Office of Professional Services have a requirement that the audio be transcribed in a certain number of days. And CERT situations, the critical incident response teams also have requirements, at least here in Colorado,
Yeah,
that
no, it's
they
common. Yeah.
have to have things done in a certain time frame. And like city councils, we've started working with more and more city councils. They have requirements that the meetings have to be transcribed and put on to their websites for public consumption for people that are deaf or hard of hearing or simply want to read and not watch a 6-hour meeting with the chief and the assistant chief, and the city council and people making complaints or whatever they're doing. Um, that is a big concern for many of our clients is the timeliness. And if they don't have the staff to do it or their staff is already behind.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so again, for the person that's the case detective or maybe the evidence technician that's like, okay, sign us up. Um, I do want to highlight the pay as you go aspect, right? So it sounds very budget friendly as far as how Ditto Transcripts runs things and have it be a very kind of, I guess, agency friendly package, right? I've seen some vendors at all kinds of different services where it's like, hey, it costs this for this size agency. You're like, oh my gosh, that's a huge contract. I need to get this level of approval, and if I can even get it, right? But can you talk a little bit more about like the ability to toggle the amount of services and the volume there?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. It's pay as you go for most of our clients. Some of them will do contracts or they will use a contract vehicle like a cooperative price agreement, which they can piggyback on and they're guaranteed pricing and it was already competitively bid. But that's also the pay as you go. So they meet the requirements of getting enough bids and the pay-as-you-go aspect, so they're not locked into, say, spending $100,000 a year. They can spend 30,000 or they can spend 20,000, and they come and go as they please. So, a lot of our clients are restricted to major felonies. They're not so property crime is not allowed to send us any of their interviews, but the major felonies are allowed to send us because those
Mm,
are the ones that usually are going to prosecution and they're higher, notoriety in the news, so they have to have everything perfect. And in some towns and some cities we work with, they may not need it every month or every week. So we won't hear from them for 6 months, and then we'll hear from them 3 months in a row because they have a string of, homicides, and then they'll disappear again for 4 months. And it kinda goes up and down, and we're okay with that because we know that that's gonna happen, and then after, a few years of working with different agencies, we can confidently predict when it's coming and how much on an annual basis, not literally predicting crime, but we know that so and so agency that has 200,000 people, they're going to send us this many hours per year. We can figure that out on our end and have the appropriate staff.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I have here a list of some of the different things you do for law enforcement, and some of this does cross over into, hey, maybe this is like the guild rep that needs to hear this, for internals or something like that, right? But it's everywhere from like body cam. We talked about statements, whether it's witness, victim, suspect, reports in general, communication. So 911 call transcripts, and we know how long and complicated those can be. You mentioned wiretaps, which obviously very involved, very lengthy. Jail calls, depositions, and so that might be more in the union vein, admin vein, and legal that often interact, right? Like, not fun to get sued. A lot of cops have been sued, but just to recognize like the judicious speed in which you might want your representation to hear that quickly. So um, those are a lot of things that you highlight really well on your website. So I can see how a lot of people, despite their range of assignment, they can see a lot of applicable benefit there.
Yeah, and it covers the whole department. So they don't have to piecemeal it to, send us the interviews, send someone else the undercover wires, send someone else the depositions or court hearings. They can send it all to us. And it makes it easier that way. They have one point of contact and it's all under one roof. We're CJIS compliant. All our people do fingerprint testing, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation does those background checks for us. And it's peace of mind at the same time too. So they don't have to keep talking to, 3 or 4 different vendors. They talk to one.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm glad you brought up CGIS. That is a big thing that I'm sure people will be glad to hear if they weren't already wondering about that. The accuracy rate. And so you have a stat on here that's the 100% on time with electronic file delivery in 24 hours or less if needed. And so is that kind of like a priority thing, depending on the service agreement?
Yes. So we it's kinda tailored to each client though also. Like the Washington State Patrol, I can use them as an example because it's a public contract.
Hmm.
Um, their turnaround time is the same for all their files. They don't ever have rush files. If they do, they'll call us and say, "Hey, we need this, by Monday," and we'll get it done. And it's not an issue. And we don't charge them more because they're a good client. We like them. They like us. Some clients will have that built into their contract where they'll have 24-hour turnaround, 3 to 5 business days, 6 to 10 business days, or say 15 business days because the case they know it's not going to trial for 3 months and they don't want to spend the extra money to have it done faster. So it's a cheaper rate the longer the turnaround time. To jump to the line and get it done real quickly, we charge more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then there's the different features. We talked about how you can batch it, or you can set it up with what you want to actually send over. You price it per minute, and so that could be a lot of things that make it a lot less intimidating. For maybe smaller agencies that have to really manage a tight budget. Um, Covered a lot of ground, and I really appreciate conversations like this. I think it's helpful whether or not someone's a decision maker, but to hear that there are services outside a lot of times, even in a different format. So I'll give the example of, when police officers are tasked with doing a certain task, and on one side it's like, oh, okay, that's police officer union work, but on the other side we are so understaffed and under manpower, that's like, okay, I don't think any actual officer is arguing about not taking that work if we could have a civilian do that or a contractor do that. So that is just my nod, not to, I don't want people to get polarized into like union work or not. I'm just trying to say, how do we do all this better so we can get to doing the thing we want to do, which is maybe in records, it's, handling the calls that come in, right, from different departments and getting the criminal justice information out, and handling the front desk and reception, and responding to officers quickly with getting a criminal history and all these things. Maybe they don't want to sit there for 2 hours, 5 hours listening to calls. And maybe the bosses don't want them to do that either because of priority of work. So it's all to say, I love being able to have you here just to offer another vantage point in ways that people can think about, how do we make this work more efficient and more effective for the team.
Yeah, and that's kind of our motto for the work we do with the law enforcement agencies is the efficiency and the peace of mind that we help provide. We don't want them calling us because if they call us, they're probably mad. Everything is done online. They drag and drop into their folder on our secure platform, and it's easy to do. And if they are calling, it's because something went sideways, and we don't want to hear from them. We'd rather not. We want to be running in the background, getting everything done on time or early, and never hear from them. That's the best case scenario for us because we know how busy they are. They're running too many cases at the same time, juggling all these different things. We don't want to be another point of stress for them.
Yeah. Oh, that's so well said. If you, and I just have this up here, like one of the example rates for pricing is like $1.50 an audio minute and up to like 175. And there's different pricing for the turnaround time that you did a great job explaining, kind of priority or rush. But if you think about the hourly rate, right? But then what it takes to hire a full-time person with benefits, and then if you need to stack on another full-time person, getting the approval, council approval, or even the budget for that can add up really quick. And so hopefully that helps people recognize like the scalability of this.
Well, and another thing to take into consideration is the court reporting schools and the transcription schools have almost all closed. The ones in person.
Mm,
So, like, court reporting is slowly disappearing because they don't have the schools anymore. There used to be 2 in Denver, they're both gone. They used to have a transcription program or it's called the Arapahoe County Community College, which is in Denver suburb. That's gone. So, people aren't learning how to do it. Like, you can't go do it in person and learn how to do it like you used to 7, 8 years ago. So there's less people that know how to do it. So finding them to work in your agency wherever you are in the US is more difficult now than it ever has been because the schools are all gone.
yeah. Yeah. That's that makes it difficult for sure if the resource isn't there. Um, Ben, you've walked through a lot of different aspects to think about, not just for transcription, not just for Ditto specifically, but just like how do we work smarter, more efficiently, to get out the product we need in a timely fashion. Is there anything else that you want to talk about with regard to what Ditto transcripts can do, or the industry in general?
Um, I think we covered a lot. We understand how important the work is, and that it is a privilege to work with the agencies we work with, and we take it seriously. It can be very stressful. I mean, I've heard the phone calls from detectives that are in a hurry or they're leaving a crime scene to follow up on an APB because the suspect has been spotted across town and they need stuff done right away. Um, yeah, we know and take care of that with pride. Like it's our small piece of the contribution to help them do their job and do it well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ben. And folks can learn more at dittotranscripts.com. Anywhere else you invite them to direct their attention?
No, our website is good. I'm not that. I guess I'm active on LinkedIn, but I'm not that active on X or Twitter anymore. So LinkedIn or our website.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ben.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.